Okay, welcome everybody back, and today's video is more of a kind of rant. There's not really going to be much juicy content here, so I apologize. Just skip this one if you like. It's more about just an opinion piece. It seems to be well timed though, because there's been, as we all know, we've got this Fuji X Summit coming up, and everybody's losing their shit over this new Fuji flagship coming, the XH S2, and it's kind of interesting to me because everybody's already, before it's out, the same old things happening with people criticizing camera gears, and a lot of people are kind of upset that it's going to have a PASM dial, like more traditional DSLR cameras. My take on it is I use both. I'm filming on the XT4 right now, and it's got the analog controls, and but I come from using DSLRs for the PASM, and I should say right now, the PASM plus the custom user modes, that's a really important piece of the puzzle there as well. And I didn't really realize when I went for the XT4 how the analog controls would really make a difference to the shooting experience. And I think this is a video for anybody, I think, entertaining the idea of going for a camera with those analog controls, because there's a lot more to it than you think. It's not just a kind of slightly different interface, but I think it actually, I feel like it nerfs the camera shooting experience. But I can fully understand those people who love the analog style. And I think the reason that a lot of the Fuji crowd are getting upset with this new flagship coming with a PASM dial is because it's not analog. And I think a lot of Fuji customers who've went to Fuji have went for the analog control. So that is one of the feature set of this camera system, and what has been appealing to them. So I can really I can understand totally why they're a bit pissed off, or a bit worried that Fuji are going to ditch analog entirely, which I don't think is true at all. I think the point was the XH was always a PASM style camera, and the XT range have always been analog. So I'm pretty sure when an XT5 comes along, they'll be absolutely satisfied in that regard, and so on and so forth. The other ones that have analog controls as well. But I wanted to just sort of briefly touch on a design. I think there's a reason that the entire industry really is with PASM, and it's only Fuji that are with the analog. And Fuji did the analog to be a little bit different, and it's a kind of nod back to a simpler time of photography, and that has appealed to a lot of people. So it's a kind of yes, there's functionality there with the analog that you don't get with the PASM, but I think it's mainly a kind of marketing kind of ploy to get people to come across to Fuji, because it looks cool. Right, the analog controls, they look cool. Let's address that, right? But the reason the other industry don't do that, I think, is because the PASM does suit a more flexible approach and versatile approach to shooting experience. Now, I've heard pros and cons on both sides of the argument, and I'll just give you my 2 cents. And that is that with a camera with a lot of custom user modes and PASM, you can well, for example, I think the next one coming up has got, and the XHS2 has got 6 custom user modes. So that's a lot of additional sort of user modes that you can use. Some other cameras only have 3, some have 4, some have 5, and so on. Little shout out to little Pentax K3 Mark III, because it has 5 user modes in the dial, but it can actually store 10. And I think that's frigging great that you can store 10 different configs and load them into the different user mode boxes and swap them in and out. So that's a really cool thing. But I think there's this kind of idea that with the user modes you can set up. I've talked about it in different videos, but just to briefly touch on it again, it's like this idea of having a different user mode for a different kind of shooting situation and environment. And I'll give you an example where, if I'm going for a bushwalk or something like that with a friend, and I might have 3 main user modes set up. I might know that I'm going to find a waterfall on that walk, because we already know we're heading to a waterfall. So I've already set up one of the user modes to have things like a 2-second timer, things like maybe bracketing if I'm going to do multiple exposures for landscape. If my camera has something like pixel shift, and I've set up for high resolution shot, even lots of different things that you might set up for that. And then I'll know that maybe there's a chance I'll come across wildlife or something, so I'll set up another user mode that has a different configuration, a certain type of autofocus configuration, autofocus continuous. I might choose to use back button focus for this type of work. I'll even have the AF lock specific to that kind of wildlife, where it's not going to continually hunt but hold on to that area for a while as it goes between bushes and branches and trees. There's a lot of things that you could customize differently, just the AF point and all that kind of stuff. And then if there's maybe get an opportunity to do a portrait shot of me and my mates or something like that, I could do a self timer, face detection, anything like that. So, and it makes it a real breeze when you're going out on these kind of adventures. It's really easy. You just come up to a scenario that you figure out which one is going to work the best, and you toggle into it for that particular moment. And it saves heaps of times. Rather than menu dive and changing the drive mode over to this or that, it's all just kind of pre-set up for you. And a couple of weeks ago, I did an event with the XT4, and I just ran with that. I just tried to stick with only that camera, not use another one, and just see how it went. And there was a few times that I found the analog controls a little bit frustrating, because during the evening reception, there was the opportunity to get a softbox out and load up, ask if the guests wanted to get a formal shot, solo, couple, groups, whatever. But at the same time that was happening in the corner of the venue, in the ballroom, there's also the dance floor, and the dance floor's going off as well. And that's obviously a good opportunity to get across there and take some shots of people dancing. Now, the settings for both those areas and the flash settings are completely different from one another. And on my other cameras that have a PASM mode, this would be an opportunity where I get everything looking right for the formal shots, and then I can just store that. I quite often keep a few slots of these custom user modes free for the event work, and I can just quickly save that. And it's not just those kind of exposure parameters that might differ, but also things just like the white balance, because I'm working with strobe and flash and gelling and things like that. So I want to have my eye on that, and it's just really easy. It's like, right, this all works. This all gives a good look. Save that to one of the user modes. Now, when I take my camera off that tripod or that formal area, and I'm shooting the dance floor, and maybe doing stuff like dragging a shadow and doing some artistic kind of stuff there. And, the settings are completely different. And again, once I fine tune for the venue and the power that flash I'm using and things like that, I can also save that to a user mode. And it makes it just really easy to go between these two kind of environments, throughout the evening, back and forth. And just all I have to do is flip a dial on the camera to go between those two types of environment. With the XT4, it wasn't like that, because there's no way to store anything. And this is where it comes down to the analog controls themselves. They're dials with ink and values fixed, and even things like the little lever for adjusting the AF, whether you're in single, continuous, or manual. That's a lever system. Okay, so if it's pointing to a value, it's kind of stuck. It's a design issue where it's stuck, and therefore you can't create a user mode and say I'd like a continuous AF for this particular type of user mode if that lever is stuck on manual or single. You can't do that. And I think that's why they've done away with some of this stuff on things like the XE4. People are crying out, oh no, they've lost this dial, this lever. I love the lever. But what I think people aren't seeing is with its omission, it's gone. It allows those things to be set up in the camera. And so you can better configure. It's all down to you as a user to actually use these user modes. And so I think that's one of the things I would say. It's if I like dials, but the more dials you have where the values are blank and you can assign them in the camera to what you want them to be, I think that's a far better idea. So yeah, I mean, this is a really quite a short video, but the XT4 on that night, it's a difficult thing for me to, I had to just use my memory for a change and remember all the three exposure parameters that worked for the formal area, and then when I'm doing the dance floor, remember the exposure parameters for that area. So on the night, I'm having to store sort of 6 digits on my head on the fly as I'm working and talking and mingling with guests, and there's flies around, sorry. And all that kind of stuff. And that's just where I think the PASM and the custom user modes just really work so much better. And I hope that it makes sense, I think, this new flagship to have that XH2S to be like that, because I think it's quite a high spec camera, and it's probably going to appeal to a lot of people who do work like that and are going to appreciate that versatility to change. Even things like video, I think video mode, if you can have custom user modes for video, that would be better as well, rather than having your dials all set up for stills, then flipping into video mode, and none of these dials are relevant anymore, and you have to change them all over again. And also, I mean, just the analog controls as well. I don't know about you, but when I'm using them, I feel as though I need to take them away from my eye from the EVF and actually physically adjust them and then bring it back up. And that's just a little bit more time wasting. And if it's dark and it's hard to see those values that you're switching to, or if you're wanting to go from continuous to auto or something like that on the dial, that's a bit annoying as well. So I think there could be a happy medium where you just get rid of things like the lever switch and just replace with a single button. That would work better, and it just toggles through them. So you just push that button to go through single, continuous, manual, and you'll soon work out. You'll know on your camera where you were in, and if you just need one push to go to the next one, or double tap to jump to the one that you're after, something like that would work. Because so buttons differ from levers because they're not something that's pointing to a value and they're kind of stuck. They can be assigned a different value in the camera and assigned to the custom user modes, and you can just toggle that button and maybe long press it to lock it or something like that if that's what you like. So that's just my personal experience. I definitely prefer the PASM. I actually really like the look of this new camera coming from Fuji, but it's just probably going to be priced way out of my range for any foreseeable time. I'll probably have to just make do with the X-T4. There's a lot of stuff that this new camera's got that I probably don't really need and wouldn't really appreciate that much. I'd really just like an X-T4 tech, basically, with PASM, which is probably XS10, but it only just has one card slot, really, which is a bit of a problem. But yeah, I mean, it's a fairly short video today. I mean, that's really it. I just feel as though people that love the analog, they're maybe shooting in a way that is fairly consistent. Like they just know where they want their shutter speed. It's a bit more casual, a bit slower paced. They're maybe not doing something like event work where you're having to think on those moments. But I can certainly understand it if there's lots of professional genres like landscape. If that's all you do is landscape, you can just have your X-T4 just set up the way you want it with the 2-second timer or whatever, bracket in, and you're just ready to go. So it's, I fully understand why some people like the analog stuff as well. If you're not somebody who needs to be fluid and versatile, I think analog controls are great. I liked one person's comment that said that the analog controls, what they are, you without turning the camera on, you can just pick it up and you know what your settings are just by looking down at the dials. And I thought that's absolutely very, very true and very valid point. So it's a pro and con thing, I think, mostly, but ultimately I feel as though there is a reason that Canon, Nikon, and Sony and anyone else is not really doing analog controls. It's probably because they realize that you're giving the photographer a lot more versatility with how to set up their camera and customize it exactly the way they want for all the different shooting conditions and things that they like to do, whether it be studio, outdoor portrait, wildlife, landscape. You've got a lot of bases covered there. If anything, I would just like more user modes. I've done things where I've done concerts and shooting in a concert pit requires quite specific changes to settings to something else that's portrait orientated, and to store that inside the camera and just be able to recall it would be great without having to sort of change that before the event. So yeah, I mean, that's it really. It's kind of like, I don't regret getting the X-T4 with the analog controls, but it was one of those things that I bought not really knowing what I was getting into when I bought it. It's like, how's this really going to affect my shooting? And I thought it's probably going to lock me down a little bit tighter. I'm going to have to decide, if I want to be, use back button focus, because maybe to change it from being back button focus and use something else for that button, probably going to be some menu diving there rather than just twisting a dial like on a PASM control and just having a different setup entirely. And it does feel like that excuse me, that has felt like that kind of process that I have to think very carefully and try and make my camera just cover as many things and scenarios as I can without being too difficult. But certainly, the analog thing for me it's just a little bit gimmicky for me. It's a little bit about style over function, but it looks nice and I can completely understand why it works for some people. But I think there just needs to be a little bit of respect there. Why people are crying about PASM dials and things like that. Maybe they just haven't really fully exploited the camera yet to that degree where they've appreciated the custom modes and been able to completely change the setup and the way the camera behaves at one twist of a dial. There's nothing quicker than that as far as I'm concerned. So that'll conclude today's video. So thanks for tuning in. If you stayed this long, leave me a comment below. Let me know what your thoughts are on it. Thanks for now. Bye.